Christmas Eve 1945 in Fayetteville, West Virginia. George and Jenny Sodder, along with 9 of their 10 children, settled in for the night, preparing for the holiday. It was a cold, clear evening, and the family had just exchanged gifts, brimming with the warmth of the season. But in the early hours of Christmas morning, a fire broke out in their home. George and Jenny managed to escape with 4 of their children, but the remaining 5, Maurice, Martha, Louise, Jenny, and Betty, were trapped inside, or so it seemed. Desperate, George attempted to re-enter the house to save them. He broke windows, tried to climb the walls, and even attempted to drive his truck close enough to the house to climb on the roof, but the truck mysteriously wouldn't start. The fire consumed the house so rapidly that it collapsed within 45 minutes. When the fire was finally extinguished, the Sodders were left with nothing but ashes and questions. No trace of the 5 children was found in the rubble. There were no bones, no remains, nothing to indicate they had perished in the fire. The Sodders refused to believe their children had died in the blaze. George insisted that if they had, some remains would have been found, even if the fire had been intense. In the days following the tragedy, strange details began to emerge. The family's telephone line, which had been working fine earlier, had been cut. A witness reported seeing someone near the house in the middle of the night, and Jenny later found a hard rubber object in the yard that she believed could have been a napalm-like incendiary device, possibly used to start the fire. The mystery deepened when, over the years, the Sodders received bizarre leads and sightings of their children. A woman claimed to have seen the missing children peering out of a passing car the night of the fire. A letter arrived years later with a photograph of a young man bearing a striking resemblance to their son Louis, along with a cryptic note reading, "Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie. Elil Boys, A90132 or 35. George even traveled across the country following tips, but none led to a definitive answer. The Sodders remained convinced their children had been abducted, possibly as part of a plot involving the mafia or human trafficking. Despite years of private investigations, appeals for help, and even offering a reward for information, the mystery was never solved. George died in 1969, followed by Jenny in 1989, both without ever knowing what had happened to their 5 missing children. To this day, the case remains open, a dark and unsolved chapter in the history of missing persons. Story 2. The disappearance of the Flannan Isles Lighthouse Keepers. In December 1900, the lighthouse on the desolate Flannan Isles off the west coast of Scotland went dark. The lighthouse was manned by 3 experienced keepers, Thomas Marshall, James Ducat, and Donald MacArthur. Their job was to ensure the light remained functional, as it was vital for the safe passage of ships. But when a relief vessel arrived on December 26th to check on the keepers, they found the lighthouse eerily silent, its light extinguished, and no sign of the 3 men. Captain James Harvey, who was in charge of the relief mission, immediately knew something was wrong. No one came out to greet the ship, which was standard procedure. Harvey sent a crew member, Joseph Moore, ashore to investigate. Moore found the lighthouse in a strange state. The door was unlocked, and inside, the table was set as if the men had just left in the middle of a meal. Coats were missing, which suggested they had left in a hurry. But the clocks had stopped, as though the passage of time itself had ceased the moment the men disappeared. A logbook was discovered, containing the final unsettling entries from the days leading up to their disappearance. On December 12th, Marshall wrote that there had been severe winds, the worst he had ever seen, even though no storms had been reported in the area. He also noted that Ducat had been unusually quiet, and that MacArthur, a seasoned mariner known for his tough demeanor, had been crying. In another entry, Marshall reported that all 3 men had prayed together, despite the fact that none of them were particularly religious. The final entry was made on December 15th, stating, "Storm ended. Sea calm. God is over all." After that, there was nothing. No bodies were ever found. Investigators concluded that a freak wave might have swept all three men into the sea as they tried to secure the lighthouse during a storm. But this theory didn't sit well with everyone. For one, the weather had reportedly been calm at the time of their disappearance. Moreover, the men were highly experienced, unlikely to all leave the lighthouse at once, especially during a storm. Over the years, speculation about what happened has included everything from alien abduction to a violent altercation among the men. Some have even suggested that supernatural forces or ancient island curses might have been involved, given the eerie, remote location of the Flannan Isles. Whatever the truth, the disappearance of the three lighthouse keepers remains one of Scotland's most enduring and chilling mysteries. Story 3: The Greenbrier Ghost. In the winter of 1897, in Greenbrier County, West Virginia, a young woman named Zona Heaster Shue was found dead in her home. Her body was discovered by a local boy who had been sent on an errand by her husband, Erasmus Trout Shue. Zona was lying at the foot of the stairs, her body unnaturally contorted, as if she had fallen. Her death was initially ruled an accident, attributed to everlasting faint or natural causes, without much investigation. Zona's husband seemed distraught, but he acted strangely during the wake, hovering over her body, refusing to let anyone get too close. Zona's mother, Mary Jane Heaster, however, was not convinced. From the moment she heard of her daughter's death, she was certain that Trout had something to do with it. But with no evidence, there was little she could do, until Zona came to her in a dream. For 4 consecutive nights, Mary Jane claimed that Zona's spirit appeared to her, explaining in vivid detail how Trout had brutally murdered her by strangling her after a violent argument. Determined to seek justice, Mary Jane went to the local prosecutor, insisting that her daughter's body be exhumed and re-examined. Surprisingly, the prosecutor agreed, and an autopsy was performed. The results were shocking. Zona's neck had been broken, and her windpipe crushed, consistent with strangulation. Trout Shue was arrested and charged with her murder. During the trial, the ghostly visitation became a central part of the testimony. Mary Jane confidently recounted her dream, claiming that her daughter had told her exactly how she had died. While the defense tried to dismiss this as the ravings of a grief-stricken mother, the physical evidence was undeniable. The jury was convinced of Trout's guilt, and he was sentenced to life in prison. He died just a few years later behind bars. Zona's spirit was never seen again after Trout's conviction, leading many to believe that she had returned from the grave solely to ensure that justice was served. To this day, Zona Heaster Shue remains the only case in U.S. history where a ghost's testimony helped secure a murder conviction. The story of the Greenbrier Ghost continues to haunt West Virginia, a strange blend of folklore and true crime that blurs the line between the natural and supernatural.